Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of my top 20 Super Nintendo games. This is going to be covering number 10 to number 1, and let's dive right in with number 10, which is Mega Man X3. Now, this was one of the harder choices I had to make with this list. I decided to go with only one game per series, and the X trilogy on Super Nintendo I love. Every single one of them. I played them all when I was a kid, over and over and over again. Mega Man X was the only one I owned. X3 and X2 I rented a lot of the time. But X3 was the first game in the series that I played, the X series that is. It introduced me to the X series, and actually the first time I played it, I didn't even know you could wall jump. It took me forever to realize you could do that, so when I finally did do it, and there was no manual or anything, I was just like, holy shit, this is so cool. Like, it was the coolest thing ever to me as a kid that you could climb walls. Like, I thought that was just badass, and it changes the game in really interesting ways. X3 had ride armors that you could find in the levels, and there was just like a bigger emphasis on finding collectibles in these environments. Like, the levels weren't just linear point A to point B levels. There was a lot more to uncover in them. It's the most challenging of the X games, which is another big reason I like it the best. A lot of memorable bosses, some very tough ones. I love the castle stages. The music is awesome. It's very heavy metal. Neon Tiger stage is basically My Michelle, Guns N' Roses' My Michelle. It's pretty much the exact same song. But this game's fantastic. A lot of people might say X is their favorite, and I like that one a lot as well. Although I might even like X2 better than X. I like them all three almost equally. Just X3 is the one that I keep coming back to. Playing as Zero was another cool thing. You never got to play as Zero in Mega Man, or in X and X2, so I thought that was really cool. So yeah, X3 definitely earns the spot here. At number 9 is Final Fantasy VI, the first Final Fantasy game I ever played, and it was only actually a couple of years ago. I just never got around to playing any of the Final Fantasies. I didn't grow up with them, and it was the same thing with the ones on Super Nintendo. I never rented them, I never owned them. I just didn't get around to them, and I played this game for the first time not too long ago, and I fell in love with it. The story, the characters, the music, that opening is epic, just absolutely epic. The writing is fantastic. The soundtrack is weird too, because at first I didn't think it was all that great after hearing people talk about it, but after I played the game and went back and listened to a lot of the songs, I realized how amazing that soundtrack was. The battle system was really fun. I liked how each character was completely different from each other, like in terms of how they play in battle. It was a very lengthy game. The only complaint I can level against it really was like Kefka's Tower. Like, it was appropriate for a final dungeon. Like, it was pretty difficult for me, but I found like the random encounter rate was just way too high there, and I hated how they like made you use different teams of your characters, because I didn't level up. Like, I stuck with a party of 4 characters and used them the entire game. So when I got there and realized you had to split up your team, all my characters were under-leveled, so it made that whole area of the game like a complete pain in the ass. Kefka in general, an amazing villain. Even though Final Fantasy VI is not my favorite Final Fantasy from the ones I have played, I did prefer 7 a tad more. I can definitely see why people call this like their favorite Final Fantasy, the best game of all time. I know most people I know that are fans of the series consider this one the best. I can definitely understand why. Like, I loved this game. Lots of memorable moments. The opera scene was ahead of its time, I'm sure, when this game came out. Like, again, like, this game kind of changed JRPGs, really, in a way. Like, it was honestly a lot of the things like Final Fantasy VII did. Like, Final Fantasy VI was doing them, like, on the Super Nintendo. But really, yeah, a landmark title. Don't love it as much as a lot of people do, because I just don't have that nostalgia for it. And I played it for the first time very recently, but definitely one of the Super Nintendo's best games. At number 8 is Demon's Crest. The game I would consider the most underrated on the Super Nintendo. I played it for the first time for my October horror gaming marathon, and this game blew me away. Honestly, like, it's a shame that people don't talk about this game more, because I think it's right up there with like the best platformers on the Super Nintendo. A very unique game. It almost has a Metroidvania style to it, where you have like almost like a Final Fantasy-esque world map where you can choose your locations, and you get all these new abilities, and you can go back to previous levels and unlock different shortcuts and more areas to go in those levels to get new powers. There's like a neat little flying ability you get where you can hover in the air and shoot your enemies. There's tons of different power-ups to unlock. You can change your forms in this game. The combat is fantastic. The controls are perfect. They feel so great. The bosses are really, really cool. I really enjoyed the bosses in this game. It's got a really awesome, like, gothic setting to the game. The music is fantastic. It really caught me off guard, honestly, and it is one of those games that's getting a bit pricey. Honestly, it's like $70, $70 to $80 now for a cartridge. Honestly, it could be a short game. You can blaze through it if you don't try to 100% it, but though it's one of those games where as soon as you start it, you're going to want to 100% it. It's just one of those games that makes you want to go and see all it has to offer, but it can be short and it can be a bit easy. It certainly didn't challenge me all that much, other than maybe a few bosses towards the end, but it's just such an enjoyable game. Like, it's so fun and different for the time. I mean, you can tell it borrows a lot from like Super Metroid, for instance, but honestly, I enjoyed it more than I did that game, because this game, it's not that hard to get lost. Like, the environment, like, the levels themselves aren't too big, but there's some cool mini games too, and there's like shops you can go to, and you can buy items and like health items and things like that. Tons to explore. It's a really amazing game. It's part of the Gargoyle's Quest trilogy, I believe. I haven't played any of those other games, but I definitely want to play them after playing this. It was a total surprise for me, and I would have never expected it to rank so highly for me as far as Super Nintendo games go. If you haven't played Demon's Crest, definitely go ahead and try it. It's fantastic. Is it worth the $80? It depends. If you're really into platformer, side-scrolling action games, then yeah, I'd say it is. Other than that, you might want to, I don't know, try it on an emulator first or something, but I absolutely love Demon's Crest. At number 7 is the classic Super Mario World. Would probably rank a lot more highly on some people's lists, but I mean, 7 is pretty high. What can I say about this game? I mean, honestly, I don't know anybody that doesn't like this game. Launch title for the Super Nintendo. It did. Yeah, when I got the Super Nintendo, it came with my Super Nintendo. It was the game I played the most. I just completely went apeshit with this game. I didn't get to 100% it until the Game Boy Advance version, because I just wasn't good enough at the game when I was a kid, but it's a very nostalgic game for me. I mean, the soundtrack is incredible, the play control is amazing, the world map was a huge step up over Super Mario Bros. 3, which is probably still my favorite Mario game. I think I still prefer that one slightly over Super Mario World, but Super Mario World's right up there. I love the world map with all the different bonus levels you could go to. The cape was an awesome ability. I loved Yoshi. Yoshi's was awesome in this game. It's just it even had good atmosphere. This game, a great challenge level. It wasn't too hard, but it wasn't too easy either. Super Mario Bros. 3 I thought was actually quite a bit more difficult than this one. It's just one of those games. Like a lot of people, I just played it over and over and over again when I was a kid. Honestly, it might have been the first Mario Brothers game I ever beat. Because I don't think, even on NES, I don't think I ever did beat the third game of the first one. I might have. It's been so long now, but yeah, Super Mario World, there's not really much to say about this classic game. I mean, it's well-liked for a reason. It's just a shame that a lot of new Super Mario Brothers games, granted I haven't played, like Super Mario 3D Land is the only one that really got to that, had that magic that this one did for me, but I'm definitely looking forward to playing Super Mario 3D World, but Super Mario World is just one of those games that's amazing, it's still amazing, and I always go back to it. At number 6 is Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. One of the first RPGs I ever played. Unfortunately, I didn't own it as a kid, I only rented it, I sucked at it, I didn't get very far. It wasn't until grade 7 or 8 in high school, or not high school, elementary school, when I found out about emulators that I was able to get through the whole game. The final boss in this game is brutal, though. I mean, this is just such a charming, hilarious game. It's a great RPG as well, and really unique for the time because of that action or that timing-based battle system where you'll use your attacks, and if you press the action button before you attack an enemy, you can do double damage, or if you press the button before an enemy attacks you, you can take less damage. That was so awesome at the time, and it made the battle system so fresh and so engaging all throughout. You were constantly getting new abilities. I loved the side characters in this game. I mean, a lot of them didn't feel like they'd fit in the Mario universe, and in a way this game doesn't feel like a Mario game at times, but that's one of the reasons I like it. It's such a strange, weird game. Like Gino and Mallow are such odd, endearing characters. I really enjoyed those characters. I loved, like I've said before, just the charm and humor to this game. The environment's really fun to explore. Amazing graphics. I mean, this was one of the best looking Super Nintendo games. I still think it holds up. I don't think it's the best Mario RPG. Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door kind of perfected the Mario RPG, but this is still a really fun game to go back to. And I have a lot of nostalgia towards it as well. It's a very nostalgic game for me. The soundtrack is one of the best soundtracks on the Super Nintendo, which, I mean, the Super Nintendo is known for amazing soundtracks, and this is one of the best ones, I think. Very catchy, very upbeat, but some sadder songs too, actually. The final boss, like I mentioned, is ridiculously hard, and that's... although part of it has to do with the level cap, and it's one of the main complaints I have with the game, like one of the few, is that the level cap is way too low. I would have preferred like a much higher level cap, but it's just one of those games that's really fun. Another minor complaint, the platforming can be a bit iffy because it's like a 3D game, but it's like there's some platforming that's kind of hard to do. But it's just a magical game that I always find myself coming back to it as well. It's just, I don't know, it's absolutely wonderful. At number 5 is another RPG, a classic one. That's Chrono Trigger. A game I really wish I played when I was a kid. I did get to play it though finally when I got to discover emulators. So it still has nostalgia for me. Because I was only 12 or 13 years old when I first played through this game, and man, Chrono Trigger is fantastic. I mean, it really is a masterpiece. People go between, like, what's better, Final Fantasy VI or Chrono Trigger. You either like one or the other better, and I gotta say I'm kind of more of a Chrono Trigger fan. Maybe it's the nostalgia speaking there, but what a cast of characters, man, in this game. Every single one of them is absolutely amazing, and each of them has like a great backstory to each of them. The music, how can you not mention the music? Easily my favorite soundtrack of all time. There is not a weak track on here. Corridors of Time is my favorite song in any video game. It is just, like, the first time I played Chrono Trigger, I still remember this to this day. When I first got to the area where you hear that song, I remember just putting down the controller and just sitting there listening for just, like, a good, 20 minutes. It blew my mind, that song. It was just so good. And the whole soundtrack is amazing. I know some people actually consider Chrono Cross to have an even better soundtrack, which that's got me excited to finally dive into that game. I still haven't played Chrono Cross. The battle system was absolutely amazing in this game. So much you could do with it. I loved how there wasn't random encounters. You could see every enemy on the map. It had that classic JRPG world map. It had the classic JRPG feel. An amazing storyline with time travel it was simple but endearing at the same time. And that ending, man, it's the true ending for this game is still one of my favorite endings in any RPG. The replay value with the New Game Plus option, which was never really seen all that much at the time. I mean, this game was, it was a very unique RPG for when it came out as well. Visually, it's a stunning game. I love the environments. There's not much negative I can say about the game. A lot of people bring up the difficulty and say that it's too easy, but I don't know. I've never really found that. I mean, I don't think it's a hard game, but I didn't find it that easy either. Maybe I'm just not that great at the game, but some of the bosses I thought were pretty tough. But I think it has like a perfect difficulty level where it's not too hard, but I didn't think it was too easy either. But yeah, there's other things I could say, but it's a true classic and definitely one of my favorite RPGs on the system. Actually, one of my favorite games of all time. At number 4 is Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Kong Quest. Again, this was a hard choice for me. Well, not as hard as the Megaman X trilogy choice because I had to pick one game. The Donkey Kong Country trilogy, man, is it good. A lot of people kind of I don't know, I've heard some people say like the graphics, overshadow the gameplay or something, or like the gameplay is not that great, but I think even Shigeru Miyamoto said like an infamous quote that, people will put up with mediocre gameplay as long as the graphics are great, referring to the Donkey Kong Country games, which I find that kind of weird, but I don't know, I think these games have fantastic gameplay. I mean, the controls are just perfect. The games have such a great, fast pace to them, so many collectibles and hidden bonus games, great atmosphere, and the music in all three of these games is terrific. I had to go with Donkey Kong Country 2. Even though I first played it when I discovered emulators, and number 3 was the one I played the most as a kid, and it's the one I owned. Number 3 I played as a kid as well on the Super Nintendo, but I'd always just play on a friend's copy. I didn't play that one too much. It's actually my least favorite, the first one, which I know a lot of people prefer that one. The second one, though, to me, it just had like the best level design, the best the worlds in the game. I loved Dixie Kong. I mean, I like her. I think the hairspin ability adds a lot to these games, and that's why I kind of prefer, one of the main reasons why I prefer number 2 and 3. The atmosphere in Donkey Kong Country 2 is amazing. And then, of course, I have to mention the amazing soundtrack. I mean, it's up there with Chrono Trigger for me. Sticker Brush Symphony is one of the best songs ever created for a video game. I mean, that song, man. Of course, this game also has a nostalgic value for me. But, I mean, it's just one of those games that's just flat out fun, and it's challenging. It's often cited as the hardest one in the trilogy. I've always struggled a bit more with the first one, but this game's no slouch in the difficulty department, but it's challenging in a good way. You always want to keep at it. The boss fights are really involved, too, compared to the first game. I really thought the boss fights were amazing in this game. It's a charming game as well. It's just, I don't know, I really think the Donkey Kong Country trilogy on Super Nintendo are some of the best platformers ever made, and number 2 is like an all-time masterpiece. Okay, getting into the top 3 here. Number 3, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Okay, this game's interesting, where for the longest time, I actually didn't like this game. I'm a huge Zelda fan, and for some strange reason, this game never did it for me. When I was a kid, when I played it on the Super Nintendo, I rented it once, and I didn't like it then. On the emulators, I played it again and didn't enjoy it. I want to say maybe like 5 years ago, I tried it again on emulators, and I didn't like it. I would always get to like the first few dungeons, like I think like the third actual dungeon in the game. I'd start to lose interest. And then, I want to say 2 years ago now, this would have been, I started it up on the Super Nintendo again, because I thought, damn it, I must be missing something with this game. Why do people love this game so much and I can't get into it? And for some strange reason, I was able to do it. I was able to get into it. I made more progress, and then I eventually just completely blew through the game, getting 100% on my first playthrough, which I almost never do. This game, it caught me off guard how much I enjoyed it. And up to like, I mean, it's my 3rd favorite Super Nintendo game. I can see finally why people love this game so much. I just don't know why it took me so long. The dungeons in this game are like they're so well designed, and I mean, this game kind of took like the original Zelda, that formula, and just it completely upgraded it in like every way. You had like actually a good storyline this time around. It's actually one of my favorite Zelda storylines, and quite sad actually. This game's pretty dark too. Like that opening on the rainy night is so nostalgic to me, but also very powerful and emotional to me. Fantastic gameplay. I mean, it's a challenge too. It's one of the last times where a Zelda game actually posed a decent challenge. I had to constantly go back and like I would exit dungeons and go back and get bottles, like fill them up with fairies, and then go back in the dungeons. Like the ice dungeon in particular was hard as hell, but in a good way. Like this game was challenging in a good way. Lots of secrets to uncover. 100%ing wasn't a pain in the ass in this game. It was actually enjoyable. You know, so I have a nostalgia for this game, but I didn't fully appreciate it and consider it a masterpiece until I went through it, the entire game for the first time not too long ago. It's kind of weird how there are some video games like that where you'll play them and for the longest time you just don't like them, and then eventually it starts to click, and Link to the Past finally did, and man, it's amazing. It's my 2nd favorite Zelda game, like right behind Ocarina of Time, which I kind of like the 2 obvious choices, but I mean, Link to the Past really is a masterpiece. It's fantastic. At number 2 is Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. Now, I'm kind of cheating a bit here because it's in the same series as Super Mario World, but I mean, this game is so much different from that game. I had to include this, and it's one of my favorite games of all time. One of the most nostalgic games ever for me. I had this as a kid. Well, actually, it was my friend's game. He let me borrow it like constantly, and I loved this game to death. I would play it over and over again. Like, I'd beat the game and I'd start up another playthrough. I've never 100%ed it, though. It's just way too fucking hard. Like, this is one of the hardest platformers ever if you're going for 100%. Like, it's insane. Just beating the game is not that hard. I mean, there's some levels that have some tricky spots, but it's not too bad. this is one of the most charming games I've ever played. I mean, the art style is gorgeous. That almost like it was like a crayon art style almost. The music is absolutely fantastic, incredibly catchy and upbeat, and really fits with the theme of the game. The egg throwing mechanic I thought was incredibly unique for the time. I mean, this game, when this game came out, like imagine that, like a Super Mario World sequel, and then they make this. I mean, what? It's absolutely crazy. What a risk, but such a great one, because this game, it's fantastic. Every level has something new to offer. There's so many memorable levels, like the Touch Fuzzy Go Dizzy, I think it's called, with the things that make you trip out, basically. It's just awesome. You know, very fast-paced game too. Like, the controls are amazing, and if you watch speedruns of this game, it's insane what people do with this game. Like it's absolutely crazy. The bosses are awesome, really funny, really amazing how, like, they're normal enemies just blown up supersized. The game is almost like a puzzle platformer as well, where especially when you're 100%ing the game, because you got to find all the collectibles, and the egg mechanic adds some puzzle elements to the game, which I thought were really enjoyable. But it's not slow at all. Yoshi controls like a dream. The fluttering ability adds a whole new dimension to the platforming in this game. Same with losing Baby Mario. You know, he cries and people tend to find that annoying, but I find it makes me not want to get hit. And that adds just a whole other dimension to the game. It's such a unique game. And it's really a shame that, like, the sequels are just nowhere near as good. Like, the DS game I hated. And this new 3DS one, I think, looks absolutely terrible. It's really kind of a shame that these new ones just don't have the magic the first one does. And of course, the soundtracks in those new ones are absolute garbage compared to the soundtrack in this one. But yeah, a very nostalgic game to me. I loved it as a kid, still love it now. I always go back to it. And in my opinion, it is the best platformer ever made. I know, an unpopular opinion, but I stand by it. Yeah, Yoshi's Island is absolutely terrific. Okay, number one, my favorite Super Nintendo game of all time. You probably might have called it out by now, and that game is Earthbound. What a game. What a game. The Mother series is probably one of my favorite series of all time now, after playing Mother 3, it may have been like 3 or 4 years ago when I played that, and that game is almost just as good. But now, Earthbound. I played it as a kid. I do have nostalgia for it. I remember renting it. My dad actually rented it for me. I had no idea what it was. My dad didn't know what it was. He was like, this game, Earthbound. I was like, okay, whatever. And this was one of the first RPGs I ever played, so I didn't understand it. So not only does it not have a fantasy setting, it's got a contemporary setting and dialogue that I just didn't understand. I was too young to get it. I didn't get very far. It was a very, like, the opening hours of this game are very nostalgic to me, but it wasn't until on emulators when I beat it for the first time. But I couldn't beat the leader of the Sharks. Like, he was too hard for me when I was a kid. I just could not do it. But a lot of nostalgia with this game. But what is there to say about Earthbound? One of the most unique and charming and most hilarious games I've ever played. It's one of those RPGs where you want to talk to every character. Every line of dialogue is gold. It is so great. I love the setting, the 90s, America setting, where you just go from town to town, and it really feels like you're on this grand adventure. The cast of characters is absolutely amazing. Ness is such a great character, even though he doesn't talk almost ever. There's just so many great moments in this game. One particular city that I don't want to spoil if you haven't played it is one of my favorite moments in gaming. The first time I reached that area, I was just like, oh my god, this is the best. The battle system, which is where I hear, like, the main complaints. I mean, even though this is my favorite Super Nintendo game, I'm not going to lie, it's not a perfect game. I mean, the battle system is pretty simplistic. It's your typical Dragon Quest style battle system, but I love it. I love the humor to it, where, like, every single enemy in the game is totally wacky and out there. But a lot of the dialogue that shows up in the battle system is awesome. And then all the weapons that you have, like the real-world weapons, like yo-yos and frying pans and stuff, it's just awesome. But more importantly, the rolling health meter, which I think is a great mechanic, where you can kind of save yourself from dying. If you take a critical hit and you're about to die, this, like, health meter will roll down to 0, and if you heal in time, you can save yourself. So you're not instantly dead when you take like mortal damage. I thought that was an amazing mechanic and added some. It made the battle system fresh and kept it engaging throughout. I don't know, I thought the battle system was great, especially when you add the fact that the game is quite challenging. I mean, it's not crazy difficult, but, I mean, some of the bosses are pretty tough. I think Mother 3 is the harder game, but, I mean, this is not an easy game by any means. Another thing which, this is actually one of my favorite parts about the game, and something that I'm surprised hasn't been copied. The fact that if you find weaker enemies in the game and you're way above their level, you just touch the enemy, because there's no random encounters in this game, which again is awesome. If you just touch the enemy, they die and you get the experience points. Why don't more RPGs do this? It blows my mind that this game came out in 1995 and this is still not a widespread thing for RPGs that don't have random encounters. It's just crazy. I don't know. This game was just so ahead of its time with its setting and its humor, and just, I mean, it's a shame because it didn't sell well precisely because of that. People were too used to the Final Fantasies and such, and it wasn't until like the PS1 anyways where JRPGs finally hit their stride and people started buying them. So that's always made me a bit sad that the game didn't have the success at the time, and now of course it's a huge cult following. The game goes for an insane amount of money on eBay. By the way, the game is totally worth like the $150 for just the cartridge alone. It is just, I mean, it's a good length too. It's around like 20 to 25 hours. It doesn't overstay its welcome. The music, god damn, the music in this game is fucking amazing. Like, it's very eclectic. Every song is so different. I know it was like, the composers were inspired by, the Beatles, and you can definitely feel that. There's so many aspects of this game that were awesome too, where you never meet your dad, you always call him on the phone and talk to him, and that's kind of how you save your game. You go to hotels to rest. You always talk to your mom on the phone. You go to an ATM to get money out. You get money from enemies and you deposit it into an ATM machine. You can take out money. It's so awesome. Like, this game, I could go on forever. But it's one of those games that every time I play it, like when I was recording footage for this game, I felt like I wanted to play the game again and go through the game and beat it again. I don't know, I think it's a timeless classic. And despite its flaws, I think from now on, it's always going to remain my favorite Super Nintendo game. It was either this or Yoshi's Island. I've kind of always gone back and forth between the two, but as I was making the list, you know what? Warts and all, Earthbound is definitely my favorite Super Nintendo game, and it's one of my favorite games of all time. If you haven't played it, definitely download it on the Wii U. You can get it for only like, what is it, like $10? Like, that's so worth it. But man, what a game. Earthbound, definitely my favorite Super Nintendo game. So that's it, guys. That's my top 20 favorite Super Nintendo games. Honorable mentions, I don't know, there's not too many honorable mentions. I guess I'll talk about some of the games I missed that you might have noticed that could be some of your favorites. I think there's a few big ones. Star Fox. I like Star Fox. I prefer the 64 one. Star Fox on the Super Nintendo is a bit dated, I think, but it's definitely an enjoyable game, just not enough to make the list, unfortunately. F-Zero is another big one, although, to be honest, I never really understood why people like that game. I know, it's always seemed so simplistic to me. Like, there's really nothing to it. Like, the track designs are almost non-existent. You just, like, there's no power-ups or anything that... I don't know, it's always been like a really boring game to me, and the later F-Zero games I thought were like way, way better than the Super Nintendo one. And I guess the Lufia games, Lufia 2 was like a bit too puzzle-oriented for me. I couldn't get into it, and Lufia 1 I did like. I just haven't played through it all the way. I lost my save data like 20 hours in. I haven't had the will to go back. From what I played, it was very enjoyable. I just don't know if it would have made my list. I think it would probably make it way at the bottom, honestly, but I did enjoy Lufia 1. Secret of Mana and Secret of Evermore are huge games that a lot of people love. I couldn't get into them. I don't know. Secret of Mana especially. Like, honestly, I kind of hate Secret of Mana. I'm not going to go into why, but Secret of Evermore was kind of like, I kind of had the same issues with me, for me, that Secret of Mana had. I don't know, I just don't really care for those games that much, unfortunately. And I don't know, a lot of people love those games. Amazing music, especially in Secret of Mana, but I just couldn't get into the gameplay with those games. I don't know. That might have been it. Let me know what some of your favorite Super Nintendo games are, and if I did miss any. But yeah, that will do it. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.